Hello, I'm James Rutherford, Senior Educational Technologist at City St George's, University of London. I lead on projects focused on designing and developing innovative learning environments. And over the last 30 years, I've developed my professional practice and experience in technical and managerial roles supporting teaching and learning. My presentation is entitled, Why are Informal Learning Environments Vital for Students? So as a starting point, what do we mean by social learning? And how does social interaction impact the construction of learning in terms of the physical spaces on campus? Firstly, I'd like to ask you, the audience, how do you feel about the space you're in right now? Is the chair comfortable? Can you see and hear clearly? Do you have enough space? Enough space to make notes? Are you distracted at all, perhaps by external noise or activity? And are you comfortable with the ventilation and the temperature? So, what is a good definition of informal learning? It's a good idea to ask ourselves this question before looking further into the literature. These are typical definitions gathered from university staff during a quick survey at City St George's. Informal learning is seen by many as self-directed, flexible, interest-driven form of education that occurs outside of traditional classroom or institutional settings. It is self-paced, self-motivated, driven by personal curiosity or goals. It's unstructured, it's spontaneous, it's not bound by curriculum, timeframes, or formal outcomes. Diverse in methods includes reading, watching videos, talking to others, using the internet. It's social, collaborative, and can involve learning with peers or through casual conversations. It's lifelong and evolving, and often pursued for personal growth rather than just qualifications. It's relaxed and informal, and it can happen alone or in social settings. Now, the following quotations are important to consider if we're to understand our students' preferences and to learn more about their behaviours on campus. This is from Hunbain and the paper called 7 Goals for the Design of Constructivist Learning Environments. These statements are also important, starting with Lev Vygotsky, taken from his socio-cultural theory of cognitive development, where it emphasizes that learning is inherently a social process, where individuals develop cognitively through interactions with more knowledgeable others, such as their peers, teachers, or mentors. In more practical terms, I've witnessed from researching student behavior on campus that something as simple as the right kind of furniture can make a difference to the students, their desire to stay on campus outside of class. Think of it like this. Picture your favorite pub or cafe or restaurant. Do you prefer to sit at the same table? Do you have a favorite seat? And why? Is it more comfortable, or is this where you're more likely to meet friends and family? It's a bit like the US sitcom Cheers, where everybody knows your name. I often use this quote from Susan Lamarca, taken from her work Designing the Learning Environment. We all learn differently and we learn all the time. I'll let you read the rest of it. It's also helpful to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in our understanding of informal learning and why it's important. Particularly his hierarchy of needs, thinking about human motivation. Now, Abraham Maslow was an American psychologist and a key figure in the development of humanist psychology, perhaps best known for his theory of motivation that emphasizes the progression of human needs from the most basic to the most advanced. According to Maslow, people are driven to fulfill certain needs in a specific order. When a lower level need is satisfied, the individual becomes motivated to pursue the next level. At the foundation are our basic physiological needs, such as food, water, and shelter. These are powerful motivators, and when they're not met, they dominate our attention. So using the example here, the longer someone goes without food, the more intensely they feel hunger. And Maslow argued that these lower-level needs must be met before a person can focus on higher-level psychological or self-fulfillment needs. So as we know, many undergraduate courses offer limited contact hours. But with the right environment, social learning can help bridge this gap and enhance the overall learning experience. I like this quote taken from Connectivism, a learning theory for the digital age by George Siemens, from 20 years ago now. Connectivism is a learning theory for the digital era where knowledge is distributed across networks of people and technology. Learning is no longer an individual activity, but a process of connecting specialized nodes or information sources. Now, serendipity. In a university setting, this refers to unexpected, meaningful moments of discovery that happen outside of formal learning environments, such as in a corridor, a cafe, or a common area, or even outside. These spontaneous conversations can spark new ideas, they can clarify complex topics, or they can lead to collaborations simply because people happen to be in the right place at the right time. So in this way, informal spaces can become fertile ground for intellectual growth and creative thinking. So what's the context for higher education? Well, there's been a growing concern with the student experience and the conscious use of this term by universities, keen to demonstrate a greater commitment to the students' broader engagement with their university. However, exactly what does this mean? And has it become an imprecise, catch-all phrase that needs careful consideration? I bet students think of it differently to decision makers in many universities. So the development of social learning environments is important in a number of ways. Especially, it can foster a greater sense of student ownership of the campus, and therefore it's likely to create a greater impression of belonging to that institution. This is key. And together with the reduction in contact hours that we've seen over recent decades, it's had a significant impact on the times students can spend on campus. Changes in the formal curriculum and the introduction of new pedagogical approaches lend themselves to and require greater student collaboration. So group-based learning means that students' tasks don't cease in the classroom. So there's a growing demand on students to continue to work and learn collaboratively elsewhere. So we've established that collaborative learning does continue outside of timetable classes, and students are expected to remain in those groups for project-based work, maybe even for a whole term. So typically they'd move to such areas as the library or a PC cluster room if they can arrange themselves in a group. But libraries are often full to capacity and will have noise restrictions. We need to provide more informal spaces for students to work, as well as to relax, to reflect, or have something to eat. Informal learning spaces should ideally be located near the lecture theatre, and as we know, there's still a requirement for the mass delivery of information. Universities need to adopt quite a radical approach in the delivery of courses before lecture theatres become obsolete. So ideally, these lecture theatres need to be co-located to social spaces such as cafes and bars, and they need to be accessible to all. Different places provide a variety of activities that students will engage in. They might be formal or informal, they might be using technology, as well as providing their basic requirements for comfort and space to work. Many universities have still not made the connection with informal learning, and they're in between spaces. These non-designated areas may be underused, but these spaces are often ideal for creating informal areas for learning and social activities. They can be used creatively by the clever approach of designers and architects who work with a physical setting rather than against it. A serendipitous encounter can often be a positive thing, as we've said, where students or staff or both can agree to meet again. But what if that in-between space was well designed with good furniture and acoustic treatment? Then why not have that meeting there and then? So their preference seems to be for their own spaces on campus where they can be social, make connections and establish networks, just as they do in their time away from university. These vary from person to person, and in a temporal sense, with times of day, quiet versus noisy, and over a term, as we've witnessed. There are busier times depending on the academic timetable. Zones offer a real choice for students. Really important to think about zones now. Do they need daylight? Do they need acoustic treatment? Are they quiet, away from the hustle and bustle of maybe a cafe or a busy library? It's important for students' well-being and really does contribute to their mental health. The sources here include the Wellbeing Standard, which is a leading global movement to transform our buildings and communities in the way that help people thrive. We've talked about university libraries. Typically, over the last 20 years or so, they've responded by providing social study areas, informal seating clusters, and they're used quite extensively. It's certainly accepted in the research that libraries are redesigned to cater for students' needs. Learning commons, such as the Glasgow Caledonia University, famously created a large space on different floors about 20 years ago. In fact, I myself was involved in the development of the University of Birmingham Library, which opened in 2016, where we took a student-focused approach in the interior design, a particular commitment to providing a zonal layout with the key factor of a power socket for every single seat. We created spaces for silent, quiet study, PC clusters, group pods, meeting rooms, lounge areas, and postgraduate-only spaces. So what factors do we need to consider? Space is vital in creating successful informal learning environments. Space to move, space to work. We need spaces for concentration and contemplation. We need to provide places that foster mind wandering and attention restoration. This is where biophilic design is important, and that connection with natural elements and colours, as well as the home comforts approach that we talked about before. Inclusive design, we need to think about all types of learners, not just in group study spaces, but quiet places for individuals too. We need to consider accessibility, cultural differences, and neurodiversity. We should also consider, in all things, privacy, proximity, and preferences, those 3 Ps. So what are the essential elements here? They tend to be environmental and psychological. Students need to feel confident they can work. So we need, as we said before, to control those acoustics. We need to select the right type of furniture in learning environments, as this significantly influences how students engage and how often they return to these spaces. Well-designed layouts with integrated power sources and storage can make a big difference. When students have what they need within reach, they're more likely to stay focused and remain in place. Today's students interact with information in many digital formats, and since the pandemic, they're on video calls, they're having online sessions using platforms like Teams or Zoom. These activities place extra demands on wireless networks and increase the need for accessible power outlets and charging stations. This is essential as it allows students to stay connected and to be productive throughout the day. Access to refreshments also contributes to a positive learning experience, helping students to stay energized and alert. Comfort, connectivity, and convenience, 3 Cs this time, all play a role in creating spaces where students can thrive. So, questions to ask ourselves. Many university staff often assume that today's students share similar experiences to their own time in higher education. However, this is not really the case. Generational shifts, particularly in how students use mobile technology and how they're having to balance academic, personal, and social responsibilities, sometimes called the life load. Well, that really does highlight the significant differences in how students today learn and interact with their peers and engage with their academics. So this is a real challenge in the digital age. For university leaders, understanding and adapting to these evolving student needs is essential to remain competitive and resilient in an increasingly uncertain political and financial higher education landscape. So, big questions to ask ourselves. How do students benefit by attending the campus? How does the campus attendance reward the student? And why should students come to campus and then remain once their classes are over? If we ask ourselves these questions, we'll be moving on quite considerably, as students benefit most when they can learn with and from each other. As we've heard, and as we know from the literature, learning is a social process. As part of a recent study at City St George's University, myself and the research team gathered feedback through an in-person survey and carried out space audits over 2 periods in the autumn and the spring term recently to observe how informal learning environments are being utilised. These audits aim to identify usage patterns and uncover opportunities where we can enhance the design and effectiveness of these spaces. The data has been collected and analysed, and the themes that have emerged will help us to contribute to future planning and resource allocation. I'm hoping these findings, which are documented in my paper, will be published this summer. So, to summarise, why should universities invest in informal learning spaces? It's a question that's more relevant now than ever. While we may not have a direct scientific link between these spaces and students' learning outcomes, the evidence is growing and is persuasive. Informal learning environments give students a sense of ownership and belonging. These are key ingredients for a more meaningful learning experience. When these spaces are thoughtfully designed, students show more curiosity, they're able to reflect more deeply, and engage more fully with the ideas they encounter whilst at university. So the message is clear. Informal spaces are not a luxury. They're an essential part of how students learn today. We should give students a reason to return to a place with real interest and genuine motivation. Effective informal learning is what makes a student want to come back and discover more for themselves. Thank you very much.